All right. So we've been here. What day did I get here? Monday? And you can come in a little closer so I can pick up your audio just a tad bit, right? Right there. It's perfect.
All right.
All right. So
When did you come in? Tuesday, wasn't it?
Tuesday.
Yeah.
So we're now on Saturday. Has your perception changed after seeing any of the drone footage?
Again, I try to use empathy and assume, like you, there's always the good in everybody. But the drone footage still, there's just so much that goes on down there that it's still kind of sketchy. The attitudes, all of that stuff, it still makes me ask, is he an unwilling participant or is he just as guilty? Because again, looking at the video of Rex seems like he's a lot more laid back than Craig, so could be just a coincidence, but that still doesn't mean. I'm probably more sketchy of him now than I ever have been, and that was pretty rough 22 years ago.
So that was it was a rough assessment on Tuesday, and you and I spoke, and you said even your daughter, well before this, were looking for buzzers, vultures, signs of burning flesh. And you're saying since Tuesday, since living here, since seeing the aerial footage, you're actually more on the scale of suspecting that something's off.
It's a two-edged sword because I feel like what I've seen over the property for the footage and all the people, the questions that's been asked, the comments from the neighbors, in that respect, it makes me more cautious and more concerned. I guess the only thing that makes me feel at least a little bit better is the fact that the FBI rolled in, had at least plain sight to the video or to the yard, and then I'm assuming those guys were FBI that came in a couple days later in the white pickup truck. I guess because they didn't haul him out. I'm not
that white pickup truck, not the neighbor.
No,
just making sure we don't have confusion because we saw another white pickup truck.
There were two white pickup trucks at that day, and you know that guy was distinctively different. That guy, those guys down there look like straight up undercover FBI, clean cut, beards. They're not spending time outside. I guess the fact that there's not been heavy equipment or forensics teams or dogs or anything out here now, at least that gives me some hope that if anything, if he's involved, he's not doing it here. Maybe he goes to New York and helps his brother, but it still doesn't make me feel any better that, you know, he's not doing it at all.
You think enough time has even gone through? Because that car, so they took the green avalanche from his property. Now we know today on Saturday that, at least from reporters on the ground in Suffolk County, that the warrant was for the vehicle only, and they were looking for trinkets, trophies, or cell phones inside that green avalanche. You and I spoke. I said, look, you have a lockbox on your trailer. Would you happen to have something in there from 5, 7 years ago, 10 years ago? You said, yeah, probably. I mean, I just throw junk in there and keep throwing junk on there. Do you think there could be something in that green avalanche?
I would argue, saying, I'm just using deductive reasoning, if he collected anything and threw it in that toolbox or in spots, knowing that both of them were pack rats, for them to actually literally go clean something out to reuse it, I don't see that happening. So I would assume that there was something, it's in there, it has to still be in there, because I know, just like with that, I haul tools around to work on my boat or whatever I'm doing, and you just collect stuff over the years and it falls to the bottom, so you just naturally just don't think about it. So I wouldn't be surprised, not at all.
Looking at that property, it doesn't look like it's ever been cleaned up or kept up, so I think my logic would be the same. His brother probably gave him that vehicle, and there was probably no cleanup. He just started adding tools and shit to it.
Driving it, yeah.
But would his brother leave anything in there? I guess that's the question. But you have other neighbors that have interacted with him. They call him eccentric. And sort of, you have another neighbor up there, Carol, whose husband knows him. There's sort of a mixed review from neighbors, right? He waved to some, at others, you have reports of, and I see the boat over there, a small boat that's snapped or cut in half. There's sort of and even saying that, the neighbor that said, look, he was eccentric, I said, would you go over there with me and talk? And he said, so with that, you're still, even though that he's been okay with some neighbors, you feel like there still could be, at the very least, knowledge of what his brother was doing?
Well, I look at face value. So I told you my background and experience in education. So I use common sense. So the neighbor right over here, the guy's been in his house. He's looked at the lay of the land. They thought he was Swiss cheese compared to them, right? He is the same neighbor that purchased a lot across the street from him, was cutting grass on Sunday, and he hit him with a pole. So he had a good rapport with them, and yet just something tripped in him.
You think some neighbors are scared to speak out?
They're absolutely terrified. I mean, because like for example, yesterday when we talked to Carol, you could sort of see the trepidation.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to say this, but I don't know who else is around. The neighbor right down here, he and I were talking till the crap hit the fan. All of a sudden, he goes just silent. I don't know if they just don't want to be seen on TV. I would imagine that they saying, well, I live so close to this guy, and if he's involved, and they know what he's done, that they're just probably trying to keep their distance. I mean, they are all radio silent. To me, you see me, I don't care. I am probably the only neighbor he has not cussed out. I could tell you we had an argument that day about the property line, but that was just he was with a neighbor. I walk up and down that road all the time. He never says anything to me. Other people, like the guy up the road, he must be 80 years old. He threatened him about driving down the road, threatening the kids on the four-wheelers. It's just his behavior is so erratic and so unrational that, yes, I told you about the dog. He picked up the dog. He would wave to me every time we would pass each other. Now, it was one of them, throw your finger up and, that kind of thing. He stopped and said a few things occasionally. Again, it may be just one of those things where he's just trying to kind of blend in, and that's fine. I know he's a weird guy, but what concerns me is his behavior that he can't control over the least of the things, and then the anecdotal stories that are now coming out that even I didn't know about. Is just it just sends chills up my spine, and to know his brother was down here 3 weeks, especially while I was gone. So I told you a story about the dog, right? My wife and I were just talking about this the other day. We sent my oldest daughter, at the time she was probably 17, 18, 19 years old, and she walked down there to go pick the Scottish Terrier up. Now that gives me chills going, well, if it's just as bad as the brother, or if the brother would have been around here, holy crap, it just made me feel bad.
You noticed something I noticed this week, that he seems to know when vehicles are coming down the road ahead of time, and then reacts accordingly. That white truck yesterday sort of gave it away. Is that something you've noticed before?
Well, like I've said before, and I didn't pay a lot of attention to it because I assume some people show up, they call you, say, hey, I'm coming, right?
You don't have a number? Because the neighbor said that the number that he gave on that badass motherfucker business card is disconnected.
Yeah.
So you think he got another number, or how does
I would assume he does, but I'm gonna tell you this. I have seen, I think it's the thing that's the most sketchy to me, is that when there are vehicles that I know do not belong to anybody he knows, because they're literally strangers, he then comes out as they're approaching. There are things that he sees that the neighbor gets called. He'll call the police ahead of time that look like people. There's no way he can not know this stuff without even having to place mic or cameras or both, because there is just things that happen. It's like he knows ahead of time, and obviously, there's no drones, there's nothing. I mean, I look in the sky all the time because we have planes and skydivers and everything, so I just like looking at the sky. So there are some weird, suspicious behaviors. Well, then I go back and look and go, okay, hey, look, everybody puts up ring cams and stuff like that, but how do you know all of these weird things that happen ahead of time? Like, I have been back there in those woods on the corner of my property, and I'm telling you, within 30 minutes, I'm like, they're coming out of the woodwork and won't know how I'm over there, because they think I'm on that lot. Now, how do you know that? You see how thick it is.
It's too big to know right away.
It's too big. It's almost probably 800 to 1,000 feet from his house, and then I'm back there on my property, and then how you show up and know I'm even in the woods to start with. So then that makes me going, okay, how much can he see from whatever they've got set up here on my property?
What do you call that military vehicle? You said it's a 2.5 or something? You said
They call it deuce and a half.
Deuce and a half.
2.5 ton.
Okay.
It's it used to be a troop carrier, like during Vietnam era, that kind of thing, and it was back. They still have them, but that's back like the old days when they were just like olive drab green. And now they're various camouflage colors and OD, and then it's set up for the desert and all that stuff. But It's basically a 2.5-ton troop carrier. It carries about 12 to 15 people. So yeah, it's kind of sketchy.
You noticed this week with the aerial footage that there's one deuce and a half.
Yes.
But you noted that the time previous to this there may have been two.
There were two. I've actually seen them on the road down there, so I know. That's why I said I can't. It's the best I can understand. I believe it's the neighbor behind him that had one, or he had an extra one back there in the woods. Since the last time I saw those two, because I saw them both pull out of Craig's driveway and head down towards that gate where at the end of the cul-de-sac. Since that time, that's the only one I've seen. I mean, because trust me, I wake up and I hear that diesel engine fire up, I'm like, I remember those days. And then when you hear the two, and I know they didn't have tags on them. I know you can drive them on the streets, but they weren't registered. I looked at tax records. There is nothing military registered with a tag, so I know they do not have a tag on, at least his. So I know, I can't tell you where that vehicle went. It just vanished.
And you notice it's so large that there's only one way it could come out, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's got to come out of these two streets. And which is hard for you to understand because it is so quiet here. If there's a car that goes down the next street over, you hear it.
Yeah.
You sure God couldn't miss a deuce and a half leading.
Anything I missed? Anything that you observed over the past week? I mean, I rolled in today and you were zooming in still on drone footage, and you haven't even seen the other parcels of land that we grabbed yesterday. So
I'm trying to look. I was going to get a magnifying glass. I've tried. I zoomed it in on 4K. I'm trying to look at things that I know from military background and other things that just look odd.
You also worked at the sheriff's office?
Yes. And you know, I look at a lot of these things, and like I told you, I have a criminology minor. I've always been interested in this kind of stuff. And I'm kind of like you in a sense. I don't necessarily trust the government. I think they're crooked as all get out. So I try to look at both sides. But at the same time, I've been around the world long enough to know I see things that are just helter-skelter. But then I see things, for example, like the burn piles. You got a guy who collects tons and tons of things, and yet you're going to take time to have not one but two burn piles. A burn pile in itself in the South is not, or probably anywhere in the world is not, because people love to sit out and do marshmallows and drink beer and that stuff. I do it at the lake all the time. He's not one of those guys that seem to do that, like the video footage of him having wet boots on and it's 100 degrees out here. There, to my knowledge, other than the ponds back there, there are no places that it's like swampy that you would walk in. You see it's dry as heck crap here, the ground's like concrete. There is just things that he does, and in the structures that I saw in the video footage, and trying to look like the ones that we saw at the cul-de-sac, right? Those structures further down past that wooden trailer. I can't wait to try to figure out what that is. So it's just, none of this makes any sense. It is, I've known some peculiar people in my time, and I've seen some peculiar people. But on my list, he's probably the number one person that is just the behavior, the attitude, everything is just completely strange.
In hindsight, do you feel like, once I learned that Elvis was his favorite artist, do you feel like Jailhouse Rock was the wrong song to play?
I think it was appropriate, probably, but I guess in a sense you're lucky, because I would really, honest to God, figure he would probably come out there and cuss you out. I'm assuming he probably thinks you're one of the media guys, so he's probably not going to push that button. But the only way, I would love for you to be able to talk to him and just get his side of the story. Not that he's going to tell you the truth. He could be just as Hyde, just like everybody else in the world. But I think if you could just get his story and just maybe get a glance of the property, but if anything, he'd probably come out and see.
And you said one of the guy that presumably came down yesterday in the truck, he may know your family, and maybe we can get a hold of him and try to get, I mean, it's really hard to get a hold of a guy that won't come out of his gated commune and doesn't have a cell phone. And so, I mean, I made two, like, I mean, you know, I made two attempts to sort of stand out there. I didn't blare music, but I knew he liked Elvis. I know it sounds silly, but to perhaps know that I'm not, you know, the media, but I don't think he's going to come out and talk. And I think he probably, if that was a lawyer that came out the other day, his lawyers probably advised him not to talk to anyone, I presume.
Probably. I would assume so. He just wasn't one of those people that stopped and really have a conversation. Actually, to be honest with you, since I've been here, just to actually know that the neighbors have actually spent down there and seeing the video footage of the guy up the street actually going in down there, it boggles my mind, because I don't know of anybody that had a relationship with him, because again, I'm out here all the time. Now again, I'm not out here forever, but just to see that interaction between anybody, it's been amazing, because it's just like has a bifurcated personality. He can be a nice, jovial kind of guy on one hand, and the next hand, he's just trying to, beat up everybody, threatening everybody. I've never met somebody that was almost so bipolar. So it's
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Exactly, and that's exactly who came to my mind the other day. And I was talking about, I was like, I get that's just the proverbial name of it, but it's kind of the way he is. It's like you see movies of how that is, and then you see his behavior. But I guess the real thing that scares me is about the neighbor, that he was in their house, they thought they were pretty decent friends, and then how he can be your friend on one hand, and then he can walk across the street and beat you with a stick because you're cutting grass. How do you even do your acquaintances like that? So it's just odd. I'll tell you.
I think that's it.
Okay.
I think that's it.